One winter night at 9:30, cold, tired, and cross and muddy, I had come home too late to dine, and supper with cigars and wine was waiting in the study. There was a strangeness in the room, and something white and wavy was standing near me in the gloom. I took it for the carpet broom, left by some careless maidie. But presently the thing began to shiver and to sneeze, on which I said,
Come, my man, that's an inconsiderate plan. Less noise there, if you please.
I've caught a cold,
the thing replies,
out there upon the landing.
I turned to look in some surprise, and there, before my very eyes, a little ghost was standing. He trembled when he caught my eye, and got behind a chair.
How came you here?
I said,
And why? I never saw a thing so shy. Come out! Don't shiver there.
He said,
I'd gladly tell you how, and also tell you why. But
here he gave a little bow.
You're in so bad a temper now, you'd think it all a lie. And as to being in a fright, allow me to remark that ghosts have just as good a right, in every way, to fear the light, as men to fear the dark.
No plea,
said I,
can well excuse such cowardice in you, for ghosts can visit when they choose, whereas we humans can't refuse to grant the interview.
He said,
A flutter of alarm is not unnatural, is it? I really feared you meant some harm. But now I see that you are calm. Let me explain my visit. Houses are classed, I beg to state, according to the number of ghosts that they accommodate. The tenant merely counts as weight, with coals and other lumber. This is a one-ghost house, and when you arrived last summer, may have remarked to Spectre, who was doing all that ghosts can do to welcome the newcomer. That Spectre left you on the 3rd, since then you've not been haunted. For, as he never sent us word, it was quite by accident we heard that anyone was wanted. A Spectre has first choice, by right, in filling up a vacancy. Then Phantom, Goblin, Elf, and Sprite. All these fill. They invite the nicest ghoul that they can see. The Spectres said the place was low and that you kept bad wine. So, as a Phantom had to go, I was first, of course, I couldn't well decline.
No doubt,
said I,
they settled who was fittest to be sent, yet still to choose a brat like you, to hunt a lady of 32, was no great compliment.
I'm not so young, ma'am,
he replied,
as you might want to think. In caverns, by the waterside, and other places that I've tried, I've had a lot of practice. But I have never taken yet a strict domestic part. In my flurry, I forgot the 5 good rules of etiquette we have to know by heart.
At least,
I said,
I'm glad to find the ghost is not a dumb thing. But pray, sit down, you'll feel inclined. If, like myself, you have not dined, to take a snack of something. Though, certainly you don't appear a thing to offer food to, and then I shall be glad to hear, if you will say them loud and clear, the rules that you allude to.
My first, but don't suppose,
he said,
I'm setting you a riddle, is, if your victim be in bed, don't touch the curtains at his head, but take them in the middle, and wave them slowly in and out while drawing them asunder. And in a minute's time, no doubt, he'll raise his head and look about, with eyes of wrath and wonder. And here you must, on no pretense, make the first observation. Wait for the victim to commence. No ghost of any common sense begins a conversation. If after this they say no more, you'd best perhaps curtail your exertions. Go and shake the door, and then, if they begin to snore, you'll know the thing's a failure. The second tells us what is right in ceremonious calls. First burn a blue or crimson light, a thing I quite forgot tonight. Then scratch the door or walls.
I said,
You'll visit here no more. If you attempt the guy, I'll have no bonfires on my floor. And as for scratching at the door, I'd like to see you try.
The third was written to protect the interests of the victim, and tells us, as I recollect, to treat them with a grave respect, and not to contradict them.
That's plain,
said I.
as terror and tread to any comprehension. I only wish some ghosts I've met would not so constantly forget that maximum that you mention.
Perhaps,
He said.
you first transgressed the laws of hospitality. All ghosts instinctively detest the man that fails to treat his guests with proper cordiality. If you address a ghost as thing or strike him with a hatchet, he is permitted by the king to drop all formal parleying, and then you're sure to catch it. The fourth prohibits trespassing where other ghosts are quartered, and those convicted of the thing, unless when pardoned by the king, must instantly be slaughtered. That simply means be cut up small. Ghosts soon unite anew. The process scarcely hurts at all, no more than when you're what you call cut up by a review. The fifth is one you may prefer that I should quote entire. The king must be addressed as sir. This from a simple courier is all the laws require. But should you wish to do the thing without an out politeness, accost him as my goblin king, and always use in answering the phrase your royal whiteness. I'm getting rather hoarse, I fear, after so much reciting. So if you don't object, my dear, we'll take a glass of bitter beer. I think it looks inviting.
And did you really walk
Said I.
on such a wretched night? I always fancied ghosts could fly, if not exactly in the sky, yet at a fairish height.
It's very well,
Said he.
for kings to soar above the earth. But phantoms often find that wings, like many other pleasant things, cost more than they are worth. Specters, of course, are rich, and so can buy them from the elves, but we prefer to keep below. They're stupid company, for any but themselves. For though they claim to be exempt from pride, they treat a phantom as something quite beneath contempt, just as no turkey ever dreamt of noticing a bantam.
They seem too proud
Said I.
to go to houses such as mine. Pray, how did they contrive to know so quickly that the place was low, and that I kept bad wine?
Inspector Cobalt came to you.
The little ghost began. Here I broke in.
Inspector who? Inspecting ghosts is something new. Explain yourself, my man.
His name is Cobalt,
Said my guest.
one of the Spectre order. You'll often see him dressed in a yellow gown, a crimson vest, and a nightcap with a border. Port wine, he says, when rich and sound, warms his bones like nectar. And as the inns, where it is found, are his especial hunting ground, we call him the Inspector.
I bore it like a man, this agonizing witticism, and nothing could be sweeter than my temper till the ghost began, so most provoking criticism.
Cooks need not be indulged in waste, yet still you'd better teach them. Dishes should have some sort of taste. Pray, why are all the cruets placed where nobody can reach them?
Then, peering round with curious eyes, he muttered,
Goodness gracious.
and so went on to
The
criticize.
room's an inconvenient size. It's neither snug nor spacious. That narrow window, I expect, serves but to let the dusk in.
But please,
Said I.
to recollect, 'twas fashioned by an architect, who pinned his faith on Ruskin.
I don't care who he was, fair miss, or on whom he pinned his faith. Constructed by whatever law, so poor a job I never saw, and I'm a living wraith.
Through driving mists I seemed to see a thing that smirked and smiled, and found that he was giving me a lesson in biography, as if I were a child.
My father was a brownie, miss. My mother was a fairy. The notion had occurred to her, if children would be happier if they were taught to vary. That notion soon became a craze, and when it once began, she brought us all out in different ways. One was a pixie, two were fays, another was a banshee. The Felch and Kelpie went to school and got a lot of trouble. Next came a poltergeist and ghoul, and then two trolls, which broke the rule, a goblin and a double. Next came an elf, and then a phantom, that's myself, and last, a leprechaun. One day, some specters chanced to call, dressed in the usual white. I stood and watched them in the hall, and couldn't make them out at all. They seemed so strange a sight. I wondered what on earth they were. It looked all head and sack. My mother told me not to stare, and then she twitched me by the hair and punched me in the back. Since then, I've often wished that I had been a spectre born. But what's the use?
He heaved a sigh.
They are the ghost nobility, and look on us with scorn. My phantom life was soon begun when I was barely 6. I went out with an older one. Just at first, I thought it fun, and learned a lot of tricks. I've haunted dungeons, castles, towers, wherever I was sent. I've often sat and howled for hours, drenched to the skin with driving showers upon a battlement. I've often spent 10 pounds on stuff in dressing as a double, but though it answers as a puff, it never has effect enough to make it worth the trouble. Long bills soon quenched the little thirst I had for being funny. The setting up is always worst. Such heaps of things you want at first, but must be made of money. For instance, take a haunted tower with skulls, crossbones, and sheet. What with the things you have to hire, fitting on the row, and testing all the colored fire, the outfit itself would tire the patience of a job. And then they're so fastidious, the haunted house committee. I've often known them made a fuss because a ghost was French or Russ, or even from the city. Some dialects are objected to for one the Irish brogue is. And then for all you have to do, £1 a week they offer you, and find yourself in bogies.
Don't they consult the victims, though?
I said.
They should, by rights. Give them a chance, because, the tastes of people differ so, especially in sprites.
The Phantom shook his head and smiled.
Consult them? Not a bit. It would be a job to drive them wild. To satisfy one single child, there'd be no end to it.
Of course you can't leave children free
Said
to
I.
pick and choose, but in the case of those like me, I think mine host might fairly be allowed to state her views.
He said.
It really wouldn't pay. Folks are so full of fancies. We visit for a single day, and whether then we go or stay depends on circumstances. And though we don't consult mine host before the thing's arranged, so if he often quits his post or is not a well-mannered ghost, then you can have him changed. But if the host's a lady like you, a lady of sense, and if the house is not too new...
Why, what is that to do with ghost convenience?
A new house does not suit, It's such a job to trim it. That after 20 years or so, the wainscotings begin to go. So 20 is the limit.
To trim was not a phrase I could remember having heard.
Perhaps,
I said.
You'll be so good as to tell what is understood exactly by that word.
It means the loosening all the doors.
The ghost replied and laughed.
It means the drilling holes by scores in all the skirting boards and floors to make a thorough draft. You'll sometimes find that 1 or 2 is all you really need to let the wind come whistling through. But here, there'll be a lot to do.
I faintly gasped.
Indeed. If I'd been rather later, I'll be bound.
I added.
You'd have been busy all the while, trimming and beautifying.
Why, no,
said he.
Perhaps I should have stayed another minute, but still, no ghost that's any good, without an introduction, would have ventured to begin it. The proper thing, as you were late, was certainly to go, but with the roads in such a state, I got the night mayor's leave to wait for half an hour or so.
Who's the night mayor?
I cried, instead of answering my question.
Well, if you don't know that,
He said.
Either you never go to bed, or you've a grand digestion. He goes about and sits on folks that eat too much at night. His duties are to pinch and poke and squeeze them till they nearly choke.
I said.
It serves them right.
He is immensely fat, and so well suits the occupation. In point of fact, if you must know, we used to call him, years ago, the mayor and corporation. The day he was elected mayor, I know that all of every sprite meant to vote for me, but did not dare. He was so frantic with despair and furious with excitement. When it was over, for a whim, he ran to tell the king. But being the reverse of slim, 2-mile trot was not for him a very easy thing. So, to reward him for his run, as it was baking hot, and he was over 20 stone, the king presided, half in fun, to knight him on the spot.
'Twas a great liberty to take.
I fired up like a rocket.
He did it just for punning's sake. The man, says Johnson, that would make a pun would pick a pocket.
A man,
said he,
is not a king.
I argued for a while, and did my best to prove the thing, the phantom merely listening, with a contemptuous smile. Stung by his cold and snaky eye, I roused myself at length.
At least I do defy the veriest skeptic to deny that union is strength.
That's true enough. Yet stay.
I listened in all meekness.
Union is strength, I'm bound to say. In fact, that thing's as clear as day. But onions are a weakness.
As one who strives a hill to climb, who never climbed before, but climbing ever keeps her eye on one small hut against the sky, wherein she hopes to rest, who, climbing, gains at length the place that crowns the upward track, and entering with unsteady pace, receives a buffet in the face that lands her on her back. Quoth he,
That's regular claptrap. Don't bluster any more. Now do be cool and take a nap. Such a ridiculous old chap was never seen before. You're like a man I used to meet who got one day so furious in arguing the simple heat scorched both his slippers off his feet.
I said.
That's very curious.
Well, it is curious, I agree, and sounds perhaps like fibs. But still, it's true as true can be. As sure as your name's Tibbs,
said he. I said.
My name's not Tibbs.
Not Tibbs?
He cried. His tone became a shade or two less hearty.
Why no,
said I.
My proper name is Tibbets.
Tibbets?
I, the same.
Why, then you're not the party.
With that he struck the board a blow that shivered half the glasses.
Why couldn't you have told me so 3/4 of an hour ago, you princess of all the asses? To walk 4 miles through mud and rain, to spend the night in smoking, and to find it's all in vain, and I've to do it all again. You're really too provoking. Don't talk.
He cried, as I began to mutter some excuse.
Who can have patience with a man who's got no more discretion than an idiotic goose? To keep me waiting here, instead of telling me at once, this was not the house,
he said.
There, that'll do. Be off to bed. Don't gape like that, you dunce.
It's very fine to throw the blame on me in such a fashion. Why didn't you inquire my name the very minute that you came?
I answered in a passion.
Of course, it worries you a bit to come so far on foot, but how was I to blame for it?
Well, well,
said he.
I must admit, that isn't badly put. And certainly, you've given me the best of wine and victual. Excuse my violence,
said he.
But accidents like this, you see, they put one out a little. 'Twas my fault after all, I find. Shake hands, old turnip top.
The name was hardly to my mind, but as no doubt he meant it kind, I let the matter drop.
Good night, old turnip top. Good night. When I am gone, perhaps, they'll send you some inferior sprite who will keep you in a constant fright, spoil your soundest naps. Tell him you'll stand no sort of trick, and if he leers and chuckles, you just be handy with a stick. Mind that it's pretty hard and thick, and rap him on the knuckles. That's the right way to cure a sprite of such like goings on. But goodness me, it's getting light. Good night, old turnip top. Good night.
A nod, and he was gone.
What's this?
I pondered.
Have I slept? Or can I have been drinking?
But soon a gentlier feeling crept upon me, and I sat and wept. An hour or so, like winking.
No need for Bones to hurry so,
I sobbed.
In fact, I doubt if it was worth his while to go. And who is this Tibbs, I'd like to know, to make such work about? If Tibbs is anything like me, it's possible,
I said.
she won't be overpleased to be dropped in upon at 3:30, after she's snug in bed. And if Bones plagues her anyhow, squeaking and all the rest of it, as he was doing here just now, I prophesy there'll be a row, and Tibbs will have the best of it.
So with a yawn, I went my way, to seek the welcome downy, and slept and dreamed till break of day, of poltergeist and fetch and fay, and leprechaun and brownie. For years I've not been visited by any kind of sprite, yet still they echo in my head, those parting words so kindly said.
Old Turnip Top, good night.